That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to episode 44 of Only Human. Today, we're going to deal with something that was generated from our listeners. I sent a little note out on Facebook and LinkedIn. I said, what's the toughest human factors challenge you have? And I'll talk about it on my next podcast. Got a lot of responses. But today, we're going to talk about self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. And a special thanks to Ivor Thomas, an old friend from my youth. In fact, his dad was my high school basketball coach. And we've stayed in touch over the years. Ivor, thanks for sending this topic in. There are a lot of people that chimed in around it. And so thanks to all of you as well. So let's see if we can start with a definition of what a self-defeating thought or behavior is. Pretty simply, I think it's any thought or behavior that inhibits you from becoming what you could have been if they weren't there, right? You could have been better. You have this self-defeating thought or behavior, and so you're not. But here's the deal. As we go through these, and there's a lot of them, we're going to see that in moderation and in the right times, many of these same thoughts and behaviors can be good for you. So we'll try to keep this in mind and keep it balanced as we plow through them. Before we start, though, I want to address something that my beautiful wife and best friend asked me this morning. She said, what do you know about this stuff? Beyond obviously knowing I have self-defeating thoughts and behaviors, what makes you an expert on any of this? And that's a fair question. And the simple answer is, I'm not. All I am, and all I've ever claimed to be, is somebody who's passionately curious about all of this. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm not sure when it happened, but I feel genuinely and authentically called to offer what I can to address this, because I feel in the depths of my soul, I feel that the biggest tragedy in the world is people that don't achieve what they could have or live the life that they could have. And so that haunts me. I thought it may haunt other people. And so that's why I do what I do. My goal is just to get you stimulated to think with me, not to take my advice. So please don't take any of my ideas as gospel. They're pretty much simply the result of a few decades of one guy thinking about stuff. Nothing magic, maybe useful, or maybe not. Anyways, let's get going here on self-destructive thoughts and behaviors. As I looked at this and I started to make my own list, I realized it was a pretty long one. There are at least a dozen that came to me right off the top of my head. And I doubt we're going to be able to get through all of them today. But I think this is a vitally important question, because self-sabotage in any form is the direct enemy of what we're doing here on this podcast. So if we have to come at it again next week or the week after, we're going to stick with this one for as long as it takes. And any feedback you can give me would be greatly appreciated. So let's just jump right in. I think the first one I want to deal with is destructive self-criticism. Destructive self-criticism. What is that? That's that mindset that says, God, I screwed that up. I can't believe I did that. Embarrassment. I'm not going to be able to face those people again. I'm not going to do this anymore. Right? I suck. Right? Now, I told you that there were two sides of all of these coins, and I think Non-destructive self-criticism is hugely important. We've got to be able to get beyond some of the stuff that you read online about, like, positive self-talk. I'm great. I'm the best. I am strong. I am powerful. Okay, there's some probably a little bit of science beyond that. What I really want to know is what I really am. What could I have done better? What did I do wrong, without getting it emotional, right? So when it gets emotional and when it sticks with us, begins to haunt us, it becomes destructive. So the first one, destructive self-criticism. Techniques to counter this. Avoid words like never, always, and can't. Right? I never can get this right. I always screw this up. I just can't do this. Right? There's a lot of things that in my life I've attempted I'm not very good at. Right? Someday, I have a whole bunch of musical instruments. I got a bass guitar. I got a 6-string. I got a ukulele. I've even got a didgeridoo and a drum set, all sitting nicely positioned in a rec room. And I mess around with them a little bit, but I can't play any of them, right? But someday, right? Someday I may be able to. I'm not willing to say I can't be a musician. I can't learn to play. I'll never be able to do this. I always screw it up. When you use those really strong all the time or never words, they become destructive. Right? Now, is it difficult for me to learn? Yes. Good to know. That may be positive self-criticism. But here's a second thing. So first thing is, don't use always, never. Stay away from the word can't. Second thing, develop a short memory for failure. Yes, you got to own your screw ups, but you got to get over them. Own them once, learn and move on, right? Own your screw ups once, learn from them, and move on. Big in sports psychology, you see somebody miss a 2-foot putt, and then they come back and birdie the next hole or eagle the next hole. Short memories, right? I've got a really weird technique I've messed around with a little bit, and I never really knew what it was until I read about it somewhere else. And I kind of call this a compassionate critic. It really exists inside my own head, but I've created this sort of external mindset or persona that will step in when I get overly self-critical and say, what would somebody that was mentoring you say to you about it, right? Objectively, offering understanding and maybe encouragement, practical advice on how to get better. Okay? So I've got a little picture here I'm going to bring up on the screen. I call this guy Boda. It's halfway between Yoda and Buddha. Boda, I should have said Buddha and Yoda. And I picture this guy, he's kind of an alien mentor with a third eye who can see inside of me, and he's humorous. And whenever I screw something up, he looks at me and said, but did you die? Right? Okay, no, you didn't die. So what did you learn? When you have that kind of compassionate critic, you can overcome the self-defeating behavior and turn it into a positive, right? You turn it into a positive. Why? Because you're learning from the defeat, right? Maybe there'll be another defeat that you learn from, but eventually you learn enough to win the day or to win the opportunity. So that's number one, how we might tackle destructive self-criticism. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that tells you to be gentle on yourself. I guess there's a point at which, like I said, you need to be compassionate. But if we're too gentle on ourselves, we're not going to be honest enough with ourselves in order to make progress. So there's a middle ground there somewhere. All right, number two, self-defeating behavior. Huge for me, procrastination, right? Procrastination comes in 3 different forms for me. The first form is failure to start something. Failure to start something. I've got a task. I really don't want to do it. And it makes me so uncomfortable. I'll just wait till tomorrow. Okay? Kind of a neat little tool. Somewhere I got my leadership training. It's called the 5-minute rule. And basically it says, take the most difficult thing you've got to do today and give it the most dedicated first 5 minutes of your day. Commit to working on it for 5 minutes. Okay? Oftentimes, you'll see you're making progress and you'll stick with it longer than that. But 1,000-mile journey begins with the first step. That first step sometimes is more than half the challenge, and it breaks down that failure to start procrastination. Here's my second one. This one gets me a lot. Failure to continue. Right? Failure to continue. I get new ideas all the time, and I'll start something new all the time. But you have to be able to continue it long enough to see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And when you don't, that comes up with a little bit more harsh term. When you fail to continue long enough, you're a quitter, right? And I hate that term. I'm no quitter. I keep telling myself that. So over time, what I've learned, whether it's a new training idea or a new book idea, a new project I've got around the house or on the ranch here, or whatever it is. Whenever I get a new idea, I fall in love with it. I'm really passionate about it. I'm excited about it, and I usually can start an idea that I came up with. But then I realize how much work's going to go into it, and it's very difficult to continue. Right? So what I've done there, instead of a 5-minute rule, I give it an every week rule. I don't let any of my projects, major projects, sit for a week without me doing something about it. There's some outliers there. I've got a 4-wheeler sitting down in the parking lot that has been sitting for about a year, and it's going to take me half a day to fix, but it's going to be a rough half day. But once I start it, I have to finish it because it'll all be in pieces. So I've got a good reason not to start that one, not to continue it, but I will. I'll keep you posted on that one. So far, the two forms of procrastination: failure to start, try the 5-minute rule, right? Failure to continue, try the some progress every week rule. Because when you're making a little bit of progress, there'll come that point where you see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when you see, okay, I can see the end from here, there you get the motivation to finish. And that brings us to our third type of procrastination, and that's failure to finish. This one drives me crazy, and it increases my stress level a lot. If you have projects, many, that you just can't complete, eventually they snowball into this overwhelming sense of dread, right? And I get it every once in a while. And so then I have to sit down, start nothing new, and complete a few things. What I attempt to do, even on the smallest of scales, is to finish something every day. One article, one podcast, right? Edit one chapter of a book, mow one part of the lawn, whatever. As long as I know at the end of the day, I didn't just labor all day and not complete anything, I will have some satisfaction at the end of the day to get me up tomorrow to go to work. So number 2 is procrastination. And I got a quote here to kind of summarize it. It's from James Clear out of Atomic Habits. I've quoted him before. He says, when you're younger, it's easier to let me start that again. When you're younger, it's easy to underestimate how fleeting the days can be. Each choice matters. Each day matters. Get started. When you're older, it's easy to underestimate how much opportunity you still have to do things. Don't talk yourself out of it. It's never too late to start. So it does seem to change, this whole idea of procrastination, from when we're younger, when you think you have all the time in the world, and so why bother now? I'll get to that later. And when you're older, when you say, man, there's not enough time left, I really need to focus on other things. There's always opportunities to start, continue, and complete new things. All right, that's number 2, procrastination. Number 3, perfectionism. Perfectionism gets attacked way too much. First of all, I like to think of myself as a functional perfectionist. I've written a lot and spoken a lot about practicing precision while picturing perfection, right? To drive my skills, abilities, talents, attitudes toward ever higher levels. However, perfectionism haunts a lot of people, right? Perfectionism is when you're never satisfied, no matter how good an effort you put in and how good an outcome you got. So it's different. This one's tough for me because this one doesn't haunt me because I've managed to get my hands around it. But there are a lot of people that it does really bother. And good enough is never good enough for them. And so they view everything, even their really fine performances, their fine thoughts, the things they do for people. There's always, yeah, but I could have done it better. And it is a self-defeating behavior because you don't get the joy out of the things that you are doing effectively and well. Right? So I think the technique I would offer here is, I kind of call it creative functional imperfection. Right? I don't think I've ever done anything perfectly. I may have done something perfectly for 30 seconds or a minute or two, but I've never been able to sustain perfection, never will be able to. But yet, if I'm flirting with it, I want to know I'm close, right? I want to know what I can do better. There's a article I wrote a long time ago called "The Cracked Cup," and it's about a coffee mug I own that's got a crack in it, and it actually seeps a little coffee out of it over a course of 15 or 20 minutes. But I love the cup, and I've never thrown it away. And I have a lot of cups. I could use other ones, but there's something about that imperfection that makes it meaningful to me. It reminds me that you can still function with a crack or two, right? Ground yourself in the reality of who you are and what you got to work with, right? But then, from that position, who am I? What do I have to work with? What does perfect look like for me on this task, in this moment, with this opportunity, or to overcome this challenge, right? So as you're practicing precision and you're thinking about what perfect might look like, you celebrate those improvements, right? So you don't fear making mistakes, and you're demonstrating to yourself that the imperfections in your technique or your knowledge or your skills or whatever it is can lead to really valuable learning opportunities and progress. Because once you're grounded in yourself, you know who you are, you know what you got to work with, man, you can't blame that anymore, right? So perfectionism leads us kind of very smoothly into number 4, and this one haunts me 7 ways from Sunday: fear of failure. Fear of failure, self-defeating behavior. I think, positives first here, right? If you take any one of these in moderation, they can be a good thing. I don't think we should get comfortable with failure, right? To the point where it's okay if we don't succeed at something. But there are so many people that miss out on things that might have been possible because they give up before they start, right? They don't try out for a sports team. Why? I might get cut. They don't apply for a promotion. Why? Because they may not give it to me, right? They don't reach out to make a new friend because what if I'm rejected? I'm probably just this boring guy they wouldn't want to have anything to do with. All because they fear failing before they even attempt, right? I'm a big fan of the fail forward approach, right? I love to try new things fully expecting I'm not going to get them right the first time out. Right? Give you 100 examples of that. Fly fishing. Right? I've got more flies in the trees over the riverbanks in Colorado than ever hit the water. But I learned my own little techniques. I learned what I could do, what I couldn't do, and all of a sudden I kept the fly in the water. I caught a few fish, and holy smokes, I did something I didn't think I'd be able to do, and it was fun. I still like spin casting a little bit better, but I tried something that I really feared I would fail at, and learned something from it. I think if you reframe failure as just, kind of like Elon Musk with the Starship, they've had 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 flights so far, and each one of them has failed at some point. And they celebrate like crazy, right? Remember that first one just barely got up a little ways and then blew up, and it says, man, we learned so much from this. If you treat a failure as data collection and you commit to using that data to try again, then there's no failures, right? Every failure is a failure forward. Right? Treat each failure as something that can provide you valuable information for future decisions. Right? And this shifts the focus from your personal inadequacy to get it right the first time, which very few people do, to continuous learning and improvement, right? So fear of failure, number 4. How are we doing on time here? Well, we're good. We'll at least cover one more. Big one for a lot of us, overthinking. Right? Getting caught up in an endless thought loop, and it prevents you from taking action. It prevents you from using your sound logic or being able to soak up the lessons from the experiences when you fail forward. There are a lot of overthinkers in this world, right? It's almost as bad as underthinking, right? You never want to go into something without giving it a little bit of thought. But when you overthink it, you can't ever get around to doing it, right? With a clear head or a free mind. So I have a couple of techniques I use because I'm an overthinker, for sure. I can get trapped into 100 fears of things that will never come true. But I'm trying to solve every one of them as if they might, right? So therefore, I never get around to doing the thing that I fear because I'm overthinking it. First thing I've learned a long time ago, down on paper, off your mind. Write it down. Hey, here's what I'm concerned about. I've got a daily journal. I write a ton of things in. I'll write it down. Here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid I'm going to run out of money before I finish this project, run out of time, and I won't make my next book deadline. Down on paper, off your mind, at least temporarily, right? Second, don't imagine a negative future. Shape a positive one. Don't imagine a negative future. Shape a positive one. We always tend to worry and stress about things that may or may not happen in the future. My technique is, what's the worst case scenario? Could I live with it if it happened? Okay, I'm done thinking about bad things happening in the future. Now, how can I shape my approach to the future, the things around this project, to give me the best chance of success, right? So down on paper, off my mind. Don't dwell on negative futures. Shape positive ones. And then the last one, develop some thought-stopping techniques. Right? I have all kinds of mindfulness tools I use where if a thought keeps coming back in my picture in my little head, I wrap it up in a box and it goes away. It comes back again, it goes into a box and goes away. After about the third or fourth time, I stop having that thought. But even better than that, I think if I'm sitting here dwelling on something behind my computer or in my office or anywhere, and I get up and I take a walk and I look at something different, something from nature, play with my dog, those techniques, get up, move, get out, get some fresh air, let your attention focus on something different. Those seem to be magical for me to stop my overthinking. overthinking, remember, is a loop. So once you break it, you're sort of out of it unless you come back into it again and again and again. This is not to say you don't want to analyze things. Don't get me wrong here. It's just, I think most people that overthink will recognize what I'm talking about. It's when you can't get out of that loop that says, yeah, but what if this happens? But what if that happens? So try a couple of those techniques, write it down. Don't imagine negatives. If you're going to think about how to shape a positive future, move those thoughts into action, and then practice some thought stopping techniques like getting up, petting a dog, take a walk, whatever. So the last one I want to do here today, I think, and we'll save a few other powerful ones tomorrow, is comparing yourself to others, especially negatively, but there's danger at both ends. So a self-defeating behavior can occur when you compare yourself to others and you justify your actions because you're better or worse. Right? When I was younger, this was huge for me. Right? I was always comparing myself to the wrong people, the wrong things for the wrong reasons. Right? I wanted to be a college basketball player so badly. I prayed every night for it. Eventually got there, right? But I was never going to be 6'4", right? So I'd compare myself to tall people and say, well, that's just not fair, right? Or compare myself to people in my small town that I was much more talented than. And I would say, well, why would I need to get any better? I already am ace of the base here, right? And sometimes when we're working on that spectrum between humility and arrogance, right? Humility, competence, confidence, overconfidence, arrogance, something like that. When we're working along that line and we compare ourselves to others, it's kind of an irrational, illogical approach, right? Because what we're trying to do is build the best version of ourselves. And when we compare ourselves to others, not to say don't have a role model, right? That's good, somebody that can help pull you along. But when you compare yourself to others, you're going to do it for ego-driven reasons, right? I want to feel good about myself, so I'm going to compare myself to somebody that's not as good as I am. Or you may have just had a failure and you want to give up on something, back to that fear of failure. And so you say, well, I'm not 6'4". I'm not ever going to be able to play college basketball, right? So avoid comparing yourself to others for the wrong reasons. What are some of the good reasons to compare yourself to others? When you find somebody that has attributes, attitudes, skills, a way about them that you want to emulate, by all means, mimicry is the greatest form of flattery. And there's a lot of improvements that can be made by looking at people that are better at you at something and doing that. Or even in some cases, looking at people that maybe share something you do. Maybe, there's a certain attitude you have that you recognize in them and you don't like. And then you do a little self-reflection. You go, hey, that's really a mirror of me. So negative self-comparison can be very, very hurtful. And I think a lot of us have done it. I think a lot of us do it regularly. It's something I have to be always aware of on myself. So there's an old thing from my college dorm room. It was called the Desiderata, right, by Max Ehrlich. I think he wrote that. It says, do not compare yourself to others, for always there will be lesser and greater people than yourself. At least if you're going to do that, if you're going to compare yourself to others, do it for positive reasons, do it for growth, not for ego-driven reasons. So we've started down the road here today on self-defeating thoughts and behaviors. And we've talked about 6 of them, just real quickly to summarize. We talked about destructive self-criticism and how sometimes we're our own worst enemies and we tear ourselves down to the point where we can't move forward. I talked about having that compassionate critic on the inside to help you with that. We talked about 3 kinds of procrastination, which is a big self-defeating one for me: failure to start, failure to continue, or failure to finish, and how we can use some tips like the 5-minute rule to get started, the weekly rule, making progress on something that you've already started, and trying to finish something every day so you get in the habit of finishing. We talked a little bit about perfectionism, and I mentioned that I think we ought to be able to picture perfection, chase it, flirt with it, but not be obsessive about it. And we talked about creating a functional imperfection model where we're going to get better and better and better, knowing that we may never map to that picture of perfection that we hold in our heads. Big one we talked about was fear of failure, realizing that if we fail forward, we learn from failures, that we need not fear them. In fact, we should seek them. We talked fifth about overthinking, getting caught up in that endless thought loop. Gave you some tips there. Write it down on paper, off your mind. Don't imagine negative futures. Shape positive ones in your head and then pursue it. And then some thought-stopping techniques. Pet a dog, go for a walk, etc. And then we talked about when we compare ourselves to others. We wrapped up with that one. I think next week we're gonna continue this. I want to talk a little bit about haunting self-doubt. I want to talk about avoidance behaviors. I want to talk about self-sabotage and a few other things. I'm sure the outreaches, if you'll keep them coming, will help me shape next week's as well. So thanks for joining me here today on episode 44. Boy, we're piling them up. Hopefully you've gotten a couple of ideas. Remember, my 2 cents worth may be worth $1.33, but not much more than that. It's just one person trying to get you to think along with me. So until next week, keep getting better where you are with the resources at hand, and I'll see you soon.